week about job losses across industries, across sectors, and most importantly as well, how do we actually turn the numbers around in terms of job creation? And those are all of the expectations that South Africans are hoping that he will be able to answer. And of course, some have even said that they're hoping to hear who is the man in charge amidst all of the divisions within the ANC. But to discuss what we can expect from President Cyril Ramaphosa when he addresses the nation, I'm joined by my colleagues, Gay Davis, who's our senior parliamentary reporter. Good evening.
Good evening, Mahlatsi.
Thank you for joining us. And my far left is Clement Manyatela, our senior political reporter. Good evening, Clement.
Evening.
It's a big one for President Cyril Ramaphosa. The numbers have not been looking good. The economy is the big expectation. Gay, from speaking to analysts, what are we expecting from him today in terms of the economy?
I can tell you what people are wanting to hear, and that is the president has just been bombarded by messages from political commentators, from analysts, from ordinary citizens. Please come with a plan of action, a very clear and detailed plan of action, not more pretty speeches about job summits, about further investment summits. Come with a program that is detailed, that's got timelines, that's got deliverables, and tell us when it's going to start and how you're going to measure its implementation.
And you can expect the expectation, I guess, in the sense that, we've gone through a stimulus package that was announced at the midst of the night, but we haven't seen the economy turn around at all. We've just seen actually getting worse and worse. And Clement, do you think that this is the space for him to actually deliver on that, or will we hear the same old around the job summit that has promises around job creation?
Look, this is a big opportunity for him to come out, and because it's we can't say he must give us an update of what he announced in February. It's only been a couple of months, right? So it's an opportunity for him to clearly, as Gay says, put out an actual plan. You mentioned the stimulus package. I've spoken to several analysts, economists this week who said, what happened to that? There was this big announcement last year, about 9 months ago, about how there are these big plans. There's going to be a restructuring of even move money from this department to other departments to try and sort of cushion the blow on the ordinary South Africans in terms of how they're impacted by the slow economic growth. So one, what happened to the stimulus package? He has to give us an update on that, but also just concrete plans on what's going to be happening now, and not the job summit that happened last year. They made a bold promise to put a moratorium on job cuts in the public sector, which is really one thing that some analysts are saying it's very difficult to hold on to that promise because of how the economy is performing. If the economy is not growing, how are you going to still make sure that you keep all the public servants?
And isn't that the difficulty? That is the double speak of government. On the one hand, we know that the wage bill, the public sector wage bill, is too high and unsustainable. And then on the other hand, the unions are saying we will fight tooth and nail if you start touching on jobs within the public sector. And we know the close relationship between the COSATU-affiliated unions that dominate the public sector.
But I think also the elephant in the room is Eskom, and that goes to the heart of the economy because of the risk that it poses to the economy in terms of its incredibly high debt. And I think that it also goes to the heart of the jobs issue in terms of the union's opposition to the unbundling of Eskom. We know the president met this week with the Eskom board. We know that he was updated on the 9-point plan that Eskom come up with, which he spoke about in the February SONA. So let's expect then, I would be very surprised and disappointed if we don't get some concrete details from the president tonight about Eskom and about how they're going to proceed, because he talks about the compact, he talks about labour, business, community coming together.
Please everybody.
It's a tough balancing act, Mahlatsi. I feel for him because the National Union of Mine Workers actually branded him for the first time ever as the enemy of workers, and for me that was like, what? This is the union that this president helped form, and now they're calling him the enemy of the workers because he wants to unbundle Eskom, and he's not listening to him when it says don't do it, especially if it's going to be affecting the workers. So it's going to be a tough balancing act, because on one hand business is saying just be bold and announce how the unbundling is going to happen, announce the reorganization officer. There were reports of Maria Cyril Ramos possibly being the person that's going to be in charge. But just be bold. On the one hand, the Labour is saying, if you touch Eskom, we're coming for you, and forget about our support.
But if we don't do anything about Eskom, we could actually see the collapse of the economy.
Yeah.
That is how difficult it is. And that's the boldness we have to hear from the president tonight.
Exactly, and I think that there's a point where you're going to say, I'm going to protect jobs, a few thousand jobs in a particular area, but I'm going to put the entire economy at risk in order to do that. I just think it's time for some really hard talking. I think the president actually has to pony up. I think there are questions about whether he is actually in charge. He is in charge, but is he actually in charge? And that speaks to the pushback that he's experiencing from within his own party, where forces are trying to wrong-foot him or to make him look as though he's inept, as though he cannot actually deliver on the promises that he's making. But he's got to actually show that he is the captain of this ship and that his hand is on the tiller.
There's leeway to do that, hey?
In what sense?
Because the elections are gone. You don't need to please someone and appease people because you need their support. The elections are gone. He's the ANC president. He's been given the mandate by the majority of South Africans through the ANC to govern the country. So you get there, be bold, especially if you know that the tough decisions you take now, we're going to see the dividends in the next couple of years. So the unions later may come back and say, oh, we see what you were trying to do.
And as we talk, has basically resigned, and we haven't heard who will actually replace him, and that's actually quite critical because you can't actually go ahead with the 9-point plan. You can't actually go ahead and give a bailout when you don't have assurances on who is leading and if they've bought into the plans that government has actually said they will support.
Absolutely. So he in effect is going to be speaking as Eskom CEO tonight, and we hope that he will be able to say something with authority and something that is based on action that is actually going to take place. Because the thing is, Mehlat, all the efforts that he's put in so far in terms of restoring the ability of the state-owned entities, to end the corrosion of the corruption that we've seen over the years and to actually put them back on track to do what they're meant to do in the economy, which is to be the flywheels of the engine of the economy. Changing the boards, he did that, tick those boxes, but it's been one step forward and two steps back because now some of those executives
are actually gone, and there's all the accusations that there is political interference, which we thought would be a thing of the past. We heard about political interference in Jacob Zuma's era. I don't know if many people remember. An institution like SAA, which is another mess, basically was moved from Treasury to the public administration and then back there again. But those allegations of interference have actually come back in his tenure, and people are saying that he might have to speak around that to actually give certainty, so that even if you attract somebody, they're confident enough to come in.
Definitely. And there's not only been interference even at SA and Eskom, even the SABC. The Minister of Communications, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, was accused of not listening to the management and even the board, giving them an ultimatum. That led to several board members leaving the SABC. But there has been that interference. But what I think I'm also looking to tonight from the address is whether he will somehow either directly or indirectly express support for Pravin Gordhan. He's been under attack. The ANC hasn't spoken sufficiently to defend him. They've just left him on his own, whether rightly or wrongly so. And I'm looking to hear if the president is somehow going to mention how critical the portfolio is and how critical maybe it was for him to be returned to that portfolio, or speak about how he's confident of the management of these SOEs.
I want to come back to talk about Pravin Gordhan, but just to wrap up, especially this section around the economy and SOEs, we can't forget SABC and we can't forget PRASA, which are also two key institutions. One, the majority rely on it for their education, for their news, for everything, and then the other is the transport in the city centres.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the issue around transport, is huge, given that it has social impact. It has an impact on the fabric of society. So it feeds into the rising crime that we see, because there are people who are not able to be at home. People are getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They're traveling for 2 hours. They're getting home at 7 o'clock. So I think that there there's low-hanging fruit for the president. I think that he can actually say certain things tonight that have just sort of been sitting. Remember that Parliament rose at the end of March. We went into the elections campaign. The elections were in May. It's been a long time since there's been any oversight from this institution of what government is doing. And I personally have a sense that government has kind of been on a bit of autopilot and that we're not really seeing much traction in terms of the stuff. There's a new cabinet now. He believes in their competence and their ability. I think that it's time to let them show what they can do and to take some of those quick wins and actually show the people that we are.
Because on salaries and actually paying municipal bills, which are also critical because they could be shut down. And we could actually see, as you were saying, there is no conversation around whether that bailout will actually, or at least not a bailout, a guarantee from the state would come or not.
Yeah, that conversation started earlier this year already. In February, March, the SABC applied for that bailout in March when they didn't even know they were able to pay salaries end of March. They've been able to sustain themselves until where we are now. But still, no word from Treasury, no word from the Communications Department on where that process is. But the Acting Director General of that department said, listen, we have sent a technical team to help SABC, but these are bodies, this is not money. The SABC needs money.
They actually do need money. But let's go back to what you were talking about around he has to tacitly at least support Pravin Gordhan because of the attack he's been under and the lack of support from within the ANC. But some have also said this could be possible disruption reasons by the EFF.
The EFF's deputy, Floyd Shivambu, earlier spoke to us and we asked him, are you going to disrupt the president because you have branded him a constitutional delinquent? You said you will start treating him the way you've been treating former President Jacob Zuma because of how he appointed Pravin Gordhan even when he was facing those issues with the public protector. They're saying they're having a meeting at 5:30, just an hour and a half before the president delivers his State of the Nation address, and they will take a decision then on whether they'll disrupt him or not. I mean, they always want to play that, right, Gay?
Okay, you are hoping for different. I mean, we've gone through that process of disrupted State of the Nation addresses.
Yeah, but that is a tactic that the EFF exploits, and it's not a tactic that they're going to put away easily. It is their stock in trade. But I think that they're quite strategic about why they do it and when they do it. And I think that the talk that we've heard about their unhappiness with him reappointing Pravin Gordhan as Public Enterprises Minister to his cabinet, in spite of his ongoing battles with the Public Protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane. They've come down on the side of the Public Protector and are accusing the President of undermining her and showing disrespect for her office, and they're going to try and use that as the basis. So while we've got the presiding officers saying they're not expecting any disruptions, that decision at 5:30 today could actually change things.
And there's a lot of unhappiness also around what happened yesterday with the appointment of the chairpersons of all the nominations of chairpersons of portfolio committees. At least that's the one arena where the DA has spoken out about, Game.
Yeah, the DA has spoken out about that quite clearly. I mean, what they're saying is that they're going to think about putting up their own nominees for chairpersons of committees, but it will just be a symbolic act of dissent because they're not going to win. The numbers are in the ANC's favour on those committees, as you know, and that comes directly from an electoral mandate. I think that we are going to have to wait and see how things play out. Not all of those positions are bad. I think that we've got I call them deplorables, people who have a cloud over their heads. It's not actually quite pick a word. And I think that that's really a concern because on the one hand it shows that the president's hands are not untied, that he cannot simply direct, that he has very competent, very clearly people of integrity leading the committees and taking up the powerful positions in Parliament, that these had to compromise with the factions, and I think that has sent a very bad message to the country, especially as it happened on the eve of this address, and mainly because of the ANC's own internal fumbling.
And I think that's why people are asking the questions around, will he show us who is actually in charge today? And just to name those things, I mean, I've been thinking about it. I'm just remembering very vividly Faith Mutambi just refusing to cooperate with Parliament when she was being held accountable for the mess of the SABC, which is still in a mess. Currently, we have Sebenzi Zwane, who has been named at the State Capture Commission as a stooge of the Guptas and actually a proxy for them. And part of what has gone wrong at Eskom is part of his role with pushing forward for the Guptas to actually have the coal contracts. And then, of course, we've got Supra Mahumapelu, who was forced to resign because the people of the Northwest were very much unhappy with him. Who have I left out?
Well, he went on early retirement, okay? Bongani Bongo,
Yes.
I mean, there's still a cloud around him. The ethics committee still needs to tell us what they've decided. But there's that also cloud around Bongani Bongo as well. But I mean, these are people that are gonna be chairs of committees that are responsible for holding the executive to account. But some of them flatly refused to be held to account by the same committees when they were still the members of the executive. I don't know how that's going to work, and I think it just sends the wrong message.
You had an opportunity to speak to Sebenzi Zwane, and he's saying,
give us a chance. That's what he's saying. Give us a chance. And I'm like, but people gave you a chance as Minister of Mineral Resources. You went to Switzerland to try and do the bidding for the Guptas, to try and Glencoe and even Tegeta. You were involved there. And he's saying, give us a chance. Things happened, leave them in the past. We want to start on a new slate, criticize us where we do wrong from here, but also be fair enough to celebrate with us where we do right.
The other big division points within the ANC is the Reserve Bank and the mandate. Yes, we've seen him speaking out as an ANC president. Can we expect the president to have something to say around clarifying the issue around the Reserve Bank?
Yeah, I think we should expect that. I think it would be remiss of him not to actually come out really clearly. I think there were a lot of people who were quite puzzled by his reticence not to come out sooner and be emphatic about the Reserve Bank and about what the plan or what the view was, around government's view around the mandate of the Reserve Bank. Was left to Tito Mboweni, the finance minister, and to the governor of the Reserve Bank, Lesetja Kganyago, to come to the defense, and then Enoch Godongwana of the chair of the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee. And there was this deafening silence from the president, who eventually said something as the ANC president. And I think that, you know, as the country's president, I think he needs to just say something. Either shut the door on the debate for now. I mean, acknowledge that it's a resolution of the governing party, but you have to just send out a message that just reassures people that it is not the time now.
Nor would it be the first resolution that is not implemented, of course, by the ANC. The big issue also is the land question. That is going to be a big one for this parliament, Gay, because this parliament has to finalize the amendment of the constitution.
And we've lost Togo Didiza, who is managing that process, and she's now in agriculture, and so hopefully we're going to see her moving from that end of things. I think that land is obviously one of the areas where the president can actually achieve quick wins, and that is with what he promised earlier in a previous State of the Nation address, the quick release of well-located, state-owned urban land. The land issue isn't so much about who's going to be able to farm, it's about people's access to proper living sites in urban centres, instead of the images that we've seen of luxurious properties with large houses on big pieces of land just right alongside, shacks jumbled and crammed together, living in ordure. And I think that he can really move quickly on that, and I'm surprised that they haven't already moved quickly on that. But as you say, it's been a while since we've had a sense of government actually working and moving.
So earlier we had an opportunity to speak to the newly appointed Land and Agricultural Minister, Togo Didiza, and we asked her a few questions around how will they actually implement the ANC resolutions. There's a lot of people that are expecting action now, especially around the conversation of land ownership and people being given dignity of land ownership. And people are looking for more the implementation from the ANC policy resolution constitution, from what we're expecting to happen in Parliament. Have you thought about how this process would be implemented once the constitutional amendments have been done?
First, I think let's agree there can never be a time where a society will say there's no time for talking. There is always time for talking, even if you act. So for me, I don't see the conversation saying it's a hold, we can't do anything. We must do something as we converse as a society about best options. For instance, one of the things government that is looking at is how do we start to dispose and actually release the land that is held by the state to address the community. Well, we have thought about that. We know where the land pockets that the state is holding for agriculture, for development, and it is those areas that we will start with.
There's been a conversation within the ANC around pushing ahead and expropriating land without compensation, and some farms being identified to actually test that process. Have you been briefed about that? Are you aware of those?
I'm continuing to be briefed, but as you know, that the ANC's resolution, which also the EFF on their own hand, they actually made a particular proposal in Parliament which the ANC amended and agreed with them that we need to address this issue. That process was started by the fifth administration, and it actually left it with a recommendation that the sixth administration must start and continue where we left off. And I think that process will continue, in my view.
That was the Minister of Agriculture and Land, Toko Didiza. Of course, colleagues, we have to wrap up, but we can't leave out the social issues, right? Education is still a very big issue. Health, which is a disaster area in most provinces, actually, if not across South Africa. I mean, we're still talking about places where there are no ambulances, but the public health sector is a mess.
Yeah, the public health system, I think the public health sector is actually on its knees in some areas, and I think that we are not necessarily going to hear too much about national health insurance, except just perhaps in passing, as something that's on the back burner because there isn't the money in the fiscus. And I think that there's a realization that you can't move on that until you've actually got the public health sector back up and running in a way that is going to enable universal access for everybody. So it's a really, really important goal, but it's not achievable unless you've got the funding. But beyond the funding, you actually need the resources functioning optimally. So you need the doctors in the sector, you need the machinery and the equipment. And I think that that's where we've really stumbled in the past decade. Now there's a new Minister of Health. Yep. He is a medical doctor, but he's also somebody who I think his experience at the head of cooperative governments and traditional affairs will have given him a sense of the state and the way it functions or doesn't function. And I hope that he is going to be able to bring administrative abilities to the portfolio that are going to see a difference, because really it's about efficient administration of the health service. And once we have that, we will see an improvement.
And just as we wrap up, Clement, are we getting a sense that we have a government that also realizes that they have a local government election that is coming up in just 2 years, and delivery is quite critical? And this is part of, some have said that this should be part of launching that campaign.
Definitely. And I think some people have also said, some analysts have said, that is why the president has possibly even appointed Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma as, even though some people saw it as a demotion, but those close to the president are saying, actually, that's quite a critical portfolio as the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, because you're responsible for local government, and that's going to be very critical as we head to the local government elections. So I suspect that the president today will also possibly be speaking to that.
And I also just want to add on Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, because she was the person who actually brought Home Affairs into a clean audit situation for the first time in its democratic history as a department. So she's a good administrator, she's really solid, she's really thorough, and even though Faith Mutambi is going to be chairing the COGTA committee in Parliament, let her fight with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma.
I think it's just going to be perfect for the viewership numbers for those parliamentary channels. But colleagues, that's where we're going to have to leave it. We're going to be crossing to our live stream as President Cyril Ramaphosa arrives within the parliamentary precinct, and we will be bringing to you live his State of the Nation address.
February sonar, and it's I suppose quite telling to look back and see how much has been achieved. achieved since then. And of course, we're keeping a very close eye on the red carpet and the arrival of the president, which should be, Colonel, in around about what time is he expected to be here? At exactly 1:45, is that correct?
The president should be here in the vicinity 1854.
Okay, at about 54, so that's
1854.
okay, excellent. Colonel is here, keeping time on everything for us and ensuring that we are quite aware of how it's happening. So, let's go back to some of the promises that were made in the State of the Nation. So, what he was saying was he promised this year, this was in 2018, we will be initiating measures to set the country on a new path of growth, employment and transformation. And ever since then, there's been no growth. It's all been very much so down.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Some of those initiatives that you saw, they were already in the pipeline. But I can tell you that today is his opportunity to tell us some of those concrete actions and those plans that really he was speaking about. Because if the country continues to do things the same way, we'll continue to see what we are seeing. I mean, just last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a decline in the economy. So if nothing changes, the trajectory will continue. So he has to come up with plans and measures really that will turn the situation around. Otherwise, South Africans will continue to feel the pinch.
Yeah, they will, certainly. Now, another promise was that creation of jobs. I mean, that was a very big promise, and they spoke, we're going to embark on a number of measures to address the unemployment, and one of the initiatives will be to convene that job summit. I'm quoting from the Sonar over a year ago.
In fact, after the Lekgotla gathering of the ANC, NSC, the ANC, the governing party, boldly told us that in 5 years they would reduce the unemployment from 27% to 14%. So if that is to be realized, those plans will have to be communicated today. What is it that will be done to effect that kind of dramatic or drastic action?
All right, a bit earlier you saw some visuals on your screen of the motorcade, the presidential motorcade on his way to the parliamentary precinct, and we'll continue to follow that and of course cross in and out between those visuals. So we're going to put them up on the screen once again and show you this motorcade. So making his way here into the precinct, and we're looking forward to his arrival and the welcome that he is going to get by everybody that's already convened inside and is seated and waiting and ready. Also, people that are ready and waiting are the Guard of Honor. They marched up that red carpet. They're standing right behind us and waiting in order to salute the president as he stands there on the podium in front of the stairs of the National Assembly. There's also that 21-gun salute that's going to happen, as well as that fly-by, that fly-over by our military and the singing of the national anthem. So if you've just tuned into this broadcast, you've come in at a good time. This is where we are heading into this highlight right now. So it's going to be a moment. So, in fact, this is a good time, and I'll tell you why. The Deputy President of South Africa has just arrived here at the parliamentary precinct. That's Didi Mabuza. So we're going to, in just a couple of minutes' time, be able to witness him walking up that red carpet. In fact, there are those visuals, and that's the Deputy President of South Africa making his way up the red carpet, and of course he is accompanied there with our deputy speakers and speakers as well. So let's talk to our deputy president. I mean, it was quite a difficult time when the swearing in as an MP came in. He said he was going to appear before the Integrity Committee, and then suddenly the next week everything turned around, that it was fine again, and he was sworn in, and there he is as Deputy President.
You know, it was quite interesting. I mean, as I was actually watching him, I was thinking that 2 or 3 weeks ago, so we got, in inverted commas, sold a dummy that he could not be president, because, I mean, many people just concluded that, oh, he probably was pulling out. But, you know, Leanne, many people have said Deputy President Didi Mabuza is one of the great strategists when it comes to maneuvering the political issues. I everyone out of nowhere. He said, "You've been fingering me. Okay, bring it on." And then they couldn't. I mean, the Integrity Commission.
Ladies
they
and
couldn't produce
gentlemen,
anything that was substantial.
members of Parliament, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Deputy President of South Africa.
You know, what is he? He's what do they call him? The cat with nine lives? Yeah, the cat with nine lives. He said he is surviving a lot, isn't he?
In fact, he said himself, I mean, he would say, "You know what, the cat is back." So,
Yeah, the cat is back and striking down into the nationalists. So really there he is, our Deputy President, Didi Mabuza, sitting with us, walking with him as well, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, and the Deputy Speaker of the Ceremonial as well. 10 minutes before the State of the Nation address is going to be delivered as the launch of the 6th parliamentary session resumes here in South Africa, and our President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to be delivering this to a jam-packed National Assembly, lots of invited guests, lots of VIPs, all of the MPs present there, and everybody getting ready for that arrival of our president. You know, this is taking on a bit of a different tone, because usually what happens is there's the singing of the national anthem. The deputy president is usually standing outside as well. Mzwai outside on the podium. So we can see things have changed a little bit this year.
remember, the cat has a lot of frills. I don't know, maybe that aspect could still happen, because I see there's a tent erected outside there. But they have to cut a lot of frills. That is why they tell us that they saved, I think,
46%, that's what we've been told.
46%, which is a
Normally
lot.
around about, it hovers around 3.8 to 4 million for this, but now we're sitting at 2 million, even below the 2 million mark.
Yes. So it does show. In fact, we're even saying the State of the Nation address is quite different.
It has a very different feel.
It appears very subdued. So, and I think it talks to the mood of the country at the moment. Remember, we're not doing well in terms of our economy. And as much as we are excited that there's a new beginning, but the reality is also striking. That the fact of the matter is that we have to pull up our socks. That is why all eyes will really be glued onto the TV screens to really hear our number one citizen. What is it that he will tell us, that he will urge us to go together with him to get this country out of the difficulties it's facing?
Yeah, it is, and it's big keys that we're going to be waiting to hear. And I think honesty is the one thing that people are hoping and expecting, is that we need a very honest, open and transparent State of the Nation address like never before.
Absolutely. I mean, Leanne, if they tell us that they have decided to halve, or rather to reduce the unemployment from 27 to 14%, they should be able to be very honest. What is it that they will do that will contribute towards that? Because there is an ambitious target. Of course, it's good. I mean, if it happens, all South Africans will rejoice.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the President of the Republic of South Africa.
Abu Khan Govap, Tu Khan Govap, Ais Govatse, Ti Govatse, Korekare, Kukabra, Korekare, Kukabra, Sida, Danetse, Korekare, Abotse, Kataire Kuna, in Sida Sarode, Kaiba Asiba, Sakonsi, Karasi, Wasibakwa, Abotse Kaire, Danetse de Mini, in Sida Sarode, Kaiba Asiba, Sakonsi, Karasi, Wasibakwa, Wakarati, Taragangati, Netsidisa Karuma, O Nesine, Westka, Wedare, Utse, Weida, Haubasida Kumisa, Utse, Weida, Haubasida Kumisa, Utse, Sida Kwasa Tree, Elo, Kaire Sida Kasa, Sida Nausa Kadi Tree, Kaire Sida Dixi Kusa, Kaiko Kopra, Sida Tree, Kaiko Kopra, Sida Tree, Sida Tom Tomiao, Kaire, Sida Itse, Zukwatse, Abotse Sida Dingaun Itse, Sida Itse, Manaba Quire, in Huna Wire, in the Sida Klatik Wire, Kaiser Gigo Tabo, Klasik Kasra, in the Harona Amre, Saskom Havasido, Abotse Sida Di, Ground Itse, Zukwatse, in the Sida Gangati, Watsire, Saskia Sida Elo, Sida Krute, Zukwatse, Kurukawa, Kurukawa, Kori, Ora, Atamato, Kurukawa, Ora, Ori, Kokosawa, Namawa, Concept, Gaigangans, 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 Utse, Waida, Kauba, Sida Kumisa, Utse, Waida, Kauba, Sida Kumisa, Banquet, Banquet, Banquet.
Thank you very much.
Ayesa, Ayesa, Gangan.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable members, there will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may take your seats. Thank you, members. Honorable members, the President has called for this joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces in terms of Section 84(2)(d) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, read with Joint Rule 7(1)(a), in order to deliver his State of the Nation address to Parliament. I will now call on the President to address the joint sitting. Mr. President.
Thank you. Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Thandi Modise, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, Deputy President David Mabuza, Chief Justice Mogoeng, and esteemed members of the judiciary, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, former President Thabo Mbeki, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Frini Jinwala, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Max Sisulu, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Balega Mbete, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Mr. Roger Deng, veterans of the struggle for liberation, Dr. Dennis Goldberg, Dr. Andrew Mlangeni, Advocate Priscilla Jana, Ms. Joyce Dipale, Ms. Lillian Kiachile, Ms. Smali Makungo, ministers and deputy ministers, premiers and speakers of provincial legislatures, chairperson of SALGA and the executive mayors who are with us tonight, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, Mr. Lesija Kganyago, heads of Chapter 9 institutions, leaders of faith-based formations, leaders of academic and research institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, invited guests, honorable members of the National Assembly and honorable members of the National Council of Provinces and fellow South Africans. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to address you all who are here in the nation. We gather at the start of the 6th Democratic Parliament, exactly 106 years to the day after the Natives Land Act, one of the most devastating acts of dispossession that brought about a lot of pain and indeed humiliation to millions of South Africa, came into force on this very day, 106 years ago. We recall the words of Sol Plaatje on that tragic day when he said, awakening on Friday morning, June 20th, 1913, the South African native found himself not actually a slave, but a pariah in the land of his birth, close quotes. Our people suffered gravely and endured untold hardships as a result of the implementation of the Native Land Act. The effect of that law, which was implemented today, 106 years ago, are still present with us today. More than a century after that grave injustice, we are called upon as a nation to forge a South Africa where no person will be a slave or a pariah, only free and equal and respected. We gather here at an extremely difficult and challenging time in the life of our young democracy. Yet we are also at a moment in our history, a moment that holds great hope and promise. In 25 years of democracy, we've made remarkable progress in building a new nation in which all South Africans have equal rights and broadening opportunities. Over 25 years, we have done much to meet our people's basic needs, to reduce poverty, and to transform a devastated economy that was built to serve the interests of only a few South Africans. Working together, we have laid a firm foundation on which we can build a country in which all may have peace, comfort, and contentment. Yet, we also meet at a time when our country is confronted by enormous and severe challenges. Our economy is not growing at the level that we want it to grow. In fact, in the last quarter, we had negative growth. Not enough jobs are being created in our country. This is the concern that rises above all others. It affects everyone. It affects every household. It affects you, the young man who lives in Mzimhlope in Soweto, out of school for 5 years now and still not employed. It impacts on the single mother from Delft here in the Western Cape, whose grant supports not just herself, but her grandchildren as well. It also hurts the worker in Nelson Mandela Bay, who, despite earning a salary, is struggling to make ends meet. It is hard for a young student from Salt Lake University in the Northern Cape who must rely on a thin stipend from his parents to feed himself. The lived reality of our people is just exactly what I've described. But in all this, we have heard our people. Many of us who are representatives elected here spent the better part of the past few months going through the length and the breadth of the country, listening to our people. Sibazwile abantu bakithi.
We have heard our people when they were talking to us as we were going in and out of their houses.
We had them all over where we went, even where Mr. Maimane went, where Julius Malema went.
Honorable Buthelezi.
He also heard what the people said.
Where Mr. Groenewald also went, as we saw him traveling through the length and the breadth of the country, he can also say that he
can also say that he had listened to the people.
Honorable Meshwe as well went throughout the country, and he will also testify that he has heard our people. Honorable Holomisa did exactly the same, as he also interacted with our people. Honorable Zungula did the same, and Honorable Delil also went through the length and the breadth of the country and listened very carefully to our people. Honorable Gola, Honorable Likota did exactly the same as well, and he listened. Honorable Nyocho and Honorable Hendricks, all of us went through the country and we listened to our people. And through the elections that we held in May, our people, you all South Africans, provided us with a clear mandate, a mandate that talks about growth, a mandate that talks about renewal. Much as we differed in the way that we delivered our messages to all South Africans, in the end, it was a message about growth and renewal. The persistent legacy of apartheid has left our country with extreme structural problems, both economic and social. At the same time, we are having to contend with rapid technological change that is ushering in a new world of work, that is reshaping the global economy, and that is redefining social relations. Together with all the nations of the world, we are confronted by the most devastating changes in global climate in human history. The extreme weather conditions associated with the warming of the atmosphere threaten our economy. They threaten the lives and the livelihoods of our people, and unless we act now, we threaten our own very existence. We have heard the voices of young people also who marched to this building, to the union buildings rather, last week, urging us to take action to protect our planet. It was to address these fundamental challenges that we adopted the National Development Plan in 2012 to guide our national effort to defeat poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Many of the parties represented here endorsed and embraced the National Development Plan. However, with 10 years to go before we reach 2030, we have not made nearly enough progress in meeting the NDP targets. And unless we take extraordinary measures, we will not realize Vision 2030. This means that we need to prioritize. We need to focus on those actions that will have the greatest impact, actions that will catalyze faster movement forward, both in the immediate term and over the next 10 years. It is worth noting that the medium-term strategic framework, which is a translation of how we read the NDP into government program, for the last 5 years has had more than 1,100 indicators by which we were to measure progress in the implementation of the NDP. But now is the time to focus on what needs to be done. Now is the time for implementation. And it is for this reason that as we went throughout the country, our people were saying, talking time is over. We now want action. We want implementation, and we want it now. And it is this that we have to offer our people. It is this that we need to give our people to continue having the hope of a better South Africa that will deliver a better life for them. And it is time to make choices. Some of these choices may be difficult, and some of them may not please everyone. In an economy that is not growing at the level where we want it to grow, and at a time when public finances are limited, we will not be able to do everything at one time. As we enter this new administration, we will need to focus, and we want to focus on 7 priorities. Economic transformation and job creation is at the top of our priorities. Education, skills, and health is the second. Consolidating the social wage through reliable and quality basic services is another important priority. Special integration, human settlements, and improving local government is another important priority. Social cohesion and safe communities is a key priority as well. And building a capable and ethical and developmental state is an important priority too. And the last one is building a better Africa and a better world. All our programs and policies across all departments and agencies will be directed in pursuit of these overarching tasks that we believe will be able to deliver a better life for all South Africans. At the same time, we must restore the National Development Plan to its place at the center of our national effort, to make it alive, to make it part of the lived experience of the people of our country. At the inauguration, we said that this must be seen as a defining moment for our young nation. A nation that is facing enormous challenges, but a nation that consists of 57 million people who stood up over the years and defeated one of the most terrible systems ever put together by human beings, apartheid. A nation of people with courage, a nation of people who have great commitment, We are the 57 million South Africans who refused to give in, who determined that we are going to change our life and our country for the better. And this is the moment where we are now. We also said that this is the moment where through our actions, now we will be able to determine our destiny. As South Africa enters the next 25 years of democracy, and in pursuit of the objectives of our national plan, let us proclaim a bold and ambitious goal, a unifying purpose to which we dedicate all our resources and our energies. Let us be a people who are prepared to go where we have never been before. Let us be a people who are bold and are prepared to take bold steps to move our country forward. As we enter the last decade of Vision 2030, let us even be more clearly be able to define South Africa to be a South Africa that we want, and agree that the concrete actions will be necessary for us to achieve the South Africa we want. To ensure that our efforts are directed, I am suggesting that within the priorities of this administration, we agree on 5 fundamental goals for the next decade, which are part of these 7 priorities. Let us agree as a nation and as a people united in our aspirations that within the next 10 years, we will make progress in tackling poverty, inequality, and unemployment, where no person in South Africa will go hungry. Yes, where no one amongst us, as we look at all our people, will be a person who goes hungry. And this is a bold plan for the next 10 years, and I believe we can achieve it. Our economy, we should declare, should grow at a much faster rate than the growth of our population year by year. We should also be bold enough to say 2 million more young people will be in employment in the next 10 years. We should also tackle one other important area, which is education, where we say, in the next 10 years, we want a South Africa which has better educational outcomes, and that every 10-year-old in our country will be able to read for meaning. And where we also say that violent crime will be halved, if not eliminated. Let us make these commitments now to ourselves and to each other, knowing that they will stretch our resources and capabilities, but understanding that if we achieve these goals, we will fundamentally have transformed our country. We set these ambitious goals not despite the severe difficulties of the present, but because of them. Wait,
Malema, I'm still coming there.
Honorable Malema, I'm coming to land. We set these goals so that the decisions we take now are bolder and that we should act with greater urgency. Our determination that within the next decade that no person in South Africa will go hungry is fundamental to our effort to eradicate poverty and to reduce inequality as well. In addition to creating employment and other economic opportunities, this means that we must strengthen the social wage and reduce the cost of living. It means we must improve the affordability, safety, and integration of commuter transport and low-income households. While we have made great progress in providing housing, Many South Africans, and this we heard very clearly as all of us were campaigning during the May elections. Many South Africans still do not have land to build homes and to earn livelihoods. In the next 5 years, we will accelerate the provision of well-located housing and land to poor South Africans. To improve the quality of life of South Africans, to reduce poverty in all its ramifications and dimensions, and to strengthen our economy, we will also need to attend to the health of our people. We must attend to the capacity as well as the effectiveness of our hospitals and clinics. An 80-year-old grandmother cannot and should not spend an entire day in a queue in a hospital or a clinic waiting for her medication. An ill patient cannot be turned away because there is a shortage of doctors or nurses or even medication in our clinics and hospitals. A woman in labor should not and cannot have her unborn child's life put in danger because the ambulance has just taken too long to arrive. As part of the work that we must do urgently to improve the quality of the health system, we are finalizing the Presidential Health Summit Compact, which draws on the insights and will mobilize the capabilities of all key stakeholders to address the crisis in our clinics and hospitals. We are far advanced in revising the National Health Insurance Detailed Plan of Implementation, including accelerating quality of care initiatives in public facilities, building human resource capacity, establishment of the NHI fund, and the costing of the administration for the fund. We remain concerned about rising HIV infection rates, particularly amongst young women, and the relatively low numbers of men testing for HIV and starting treatment. We will intensify our work to implement the 1990 strategy to end HIV as a public health threat, which includes increasing the number of people on treatment by at least another 2 million by December 2020. If we are able to succeed in addressing these challenges, the challenge of poverty across society will be reduced. It is therefore a matter of great concern that there are a number of children of school-going age with disabilities who are not in school. This is a matter that all of us as South Africans should be concerned about. In responding to these challenges, we have moved the coordination of disability initiatives to the center of government in the presidency. We have revived the Presidential Working Group on Disability and will submit the protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities in Africa to Parliament this year for ratification. To address the problems of working poor, the national minimum wage has been in place now for 6 months, and there are early indications that there are many companies who are now complying. A number of companies have applied for exemptions, but we get indications that a number of companies are indeed complying, which is a pleasing development. The National Wage Commission is expected to conclude research on the impact of the minimum wage on employment, on poverty, inequality, and wage differentials by the end of September this year. We cannot turn our fortunes around without a relentless focus on economic growth. Within the next decade, it is our ambition that our economy should be growing at a far greater rate than our population growth, as I said. It is only when we reach consistently high rates of economic growth that we will be able to reverse the economic damage of our past. We make this assertion at a time when the economic outlook is extremely weak. Now, following the sharp contraction in growth in the first quarter, the Reserve Bank now projects that growth in 2019 is likely to be lower than anticipated in the February budget. One reason for the lackluster economic performance has been the load shedding early this year, together with the continued uncertainty of the supply of electricity and the state of Eskom. The lesson is clear. For growth, we need reliable and sustainable supply of electricity. Eskom, as we all know, is facing serious financial, operational, and structural problems. Since the load shedding earlier this year, Eskom has, however, made much progress in implementing their 9-point plan, ensuring better maintenance of its generation fleet, reducing costs as much as they possibly can, and ensuring adequate reserves of coal. Now, in line with the recommendations of both the Eskom Sustainability Task Team and the Technical Review Team, Eskom is deploying its most skilled and experienced personnel to where they are needed most. The Deputy President and the ministers have been working very closely with these task teams to ensure that indeed we do give Eskom the necessary support. The utilities' financial position remains a matter of great concern, though. With the current committed funding from the government, which was outlined in the 2019 budget, Eskom has sufficient cash to meet its obligations until the end of October 2019. For Eskom to default on its loans will cause a cross-default on its remaining debt and would have a huge impact on the already constrained fiscus. We will therefore have to address this matter, and we will address it by tabling a special appropriation bill on an urgent basis to allocate significant portion of the 230 billion fiscal support that Eskom will require over the next 10 years in early years. This we must do because Eskom is too vital to our economy and it cannot be allowed to fail. Eskom is our collective responsibility as a nation, and we must make sure that we support it. Now, further details on this, so that we don't get too excited, will be provided by the Minister of Finance in due course. We will announce as Eskom carries on to address all these issues. We will announce a new CEO following Mr. Pakamani Hadebe stepping down. He came in at a very difficult time at Eskom and has done a great deal together with the board that is led by Mr. Jabu Mabuza to stabilize the company. We will soon also be appointing a chief restructuring officer who will be expected to reposition Eskom financially with careful attention to the mix between revenue, debt, and cost structure of the company. Now, Eskom is also working with government and other stakeholders to address its broad restructuring plan, which we announced, as well as its overall debt, including the debt that is owed by municipalities as well as individuals. As a country, we must assert the principle that those who use electricity must pay for the electricity that they use. Failure to pay endangers our entire electricity supply, our economy, and our efforts to create jobs. Now, the days of boycotting payments are over. This is now the time to build, and it is the time for all of us to make our contribution. So we call on all our people who use electricity, let us pay up so that Eskom must continue to do the work that it should do for all South Africans. Now, fellow South Africans and honorable members, to meet our growth targets, we will rebuild the foundations of our economy by revitalizing and expanding the productive sectors of our economy. This requires us to reimagine our industrial strategy, to unleash private investment and energize the state to boost economic inclusion. It requires the state to effectively play its role as an enabler that provides infrastructure, that provides basic services, a regulator role as well that sets the rules that create equitable opportunities for all players, and a redistributor that ensures that the most vulnerable in society are protected and given a chance to live up to their full potential. But there is another role that we want the state to play, and that is what I would call an entrepreneurial role, a role through which the state is able to take some risks and enable the economy to move forward. We will give priority attention to the economic sectors that have the greatest potential for growth. Drawing on our successes in the automotive sector, we will implement master plans developed with business and labor in industries like clothing and textiles, gas, chemicals and plastics, renewables, steel and metals, and fabrication sectors. We're going to substantially expand the agriculture and agro-processing sector by supporting key value chains and products, developing new markets, and reducing our reliance on agricultural imports. We will bolster the mining industry by developing markets for South African minerals through targeted beneficiation, reduce costs of inputs, and increase research and development. Through special interventions like special economic zones, reviving local industrial parks, business centers, digital hubs, and township and village enterprises, we will bring economic development to local areas. We will also focus on small, medium enterprises in our cities, in our townships, and our villages, and create marketplaces where entrepreneurs can trade and sell their products. We will make good on our ambition to more than double international tourist arrival to 21 million by 2030. This will be achieved through the renewal of the country's brand, introducing a world-class visa regime, and a significant focus on key markets that have the potential of boosting our tourism. Markets such as China, India, and indeed the arrivals from the rest of our continent. We are determined to ensure that tourists who come to our country are safe. We will expand our high-tech industry by ensuring that the legal and regulatory framework promotes innovation, scaling up skills development for young people in new technologies and reducing data costs. Wherever we have gone, young people have continuously raised the issue of the excessive high data costs in South Africa. They want data costs to go down. Now, to provide impetus to this process, within the next month, the Minister of Communications will issue the policy direction to ICASA to commence the licensing process. Now, this process obviously will include measures to promote competition, transformation, inclusive growth of the sector, and universal access. This is a vital part of bringing down the costs of data. We call on the telecommunications industry to bring down the cost of data so that it is in line with the pricing that prevails in other markets in the world. We are intensifying our investment drive. Of the 300 billion Rand of investments announced at our inaugural investment conference last year, just over 250 billion worth of projects have entered implementation phase. We continue to build a pipeline of investments which will be showcased at the second South African Investment Conference to be held from the 5th to the 7th of November. At a time of uncertainty, the work of the investment envoys that we appointed has built important bridges between government and the business sector. From their feedback, it is clear that much more still needs to be done to improve the investment climate in our country. This includes reviewing the way government coordinates work to resolve challenges that are faced by investors and reforming our investment promotion policy and architecture. Good progress has been made through the Public-Private Growth Initiative, which is being championed by Minister Dlamini Zuma, Mr. Rolf Meyer, and Dr. Van Zyl Slabbert. The private sector has committed to invest 840 billion Rand in 43 projects over 19 sectors, creating what they have arrived at as 155,000 jobs in the next 5 years. Now, in discussions with business, government has committed to remove policy impediments and accelerate implementation of these projects. We are urgently working on a set of priority reforms to improve the ease of doing business by consolidating and streamlining regulatory processes, automating permits and other applications, and reducing the cost of compliance. Infrastructure, as we all know, is a critical area of investment that supports structural transformation, growth, and job creation. It is essential to our economic rejuvenation, to giving meaning and effect to our new dawn. Our new approach to infrastructure development is based on stronger partnerships between the public and private sector and with local communities. It includes a special package of financial and institutional measures to boost construction and prioritize water infrastructure, roads, student accommodation through a more efficient use of budgeted money. As announced in the previous SONA, government has set aside 100 billion Rand to seed the infrastructure fund. We are working to institutionalize the fund, which will be managed by the Development Bank of Southern Africa, with the newly configured Department of Public Works and Infrastructure playing an oversight role. We've been doing consultation with private investors, such as pension funds, who are enthusiastic about participating in the infrastructure fund that we announced. The reforms that we will embark on will ensure better planning of infrastructure projects, rigorous feasibility and preparatory work, improved strategic management, impeccable execution, and better governance. This will provide a much-needed boost to the construction sector, which has been in the doldrums for quite a while. We will stimulate local demand and grow South African manufacturing by making sure that we encourage everyone to buy local. We call on all South Africans to deliberately and consistently buy locally made goods. Now, to demonstrate this, the suit that I'm wearing today, the tie I am wearing today, the shirt that I'm wearing today. Don't get too ambitious and ask about other things. Now, this suit was locally made, I'm happy to say, by South African textile workers working at the House of Monatic here in Salt River in Cape Town. Now, if all of us buy locally made clothes, we will be able to drive up demand, which will inject a lot of growth in our economy. Within this next year, we seek to conclude agreements with retailers to stock more South African goods on their shelves and to actively promote the great products made by South African workers. At the same time, we will promote our products more actively in the rest of our African continent and to the world. These measures are underpinned by our strong commitment to a macroeconomic and fiscal policy framework that will continue to boost confidence and investment. We are committed to prudent borrowing and stringent expenditure management to stabilize our public finances and lower the debt trajectory. The South African Reserve Bank is a critical institution of our democracy, enjoying wide credibility and standing within the country and internationally. Price stability is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for economic growth. Rising prices of goods and services erode the purchasing power of all South Africans, but especially the poor. Inflation further undermines the competitiveness of our exports and our import competing firms, putting industries and jobs at risk. For these reasons, our constitution mandates the South African Reserve Bank to protect the value of our currency in the interests of balanced and sustainable growth. Today, we reaffirm this constitutional mandate, which the Reserve Bank must pursue independently without fear, favor, or prejudice. Our Constitution also requires that, listen carefully, our Constitution also requires that there should be regular consultation between the Reserve Bank and the Minister of Finance to do what? To promote macroeconomic coordination in all the interests, all in the interests of employment creation and economic growth. Now, if we are to be internationally competitive, if we are to attract investment, we must address the high cost of doing business in South Africa and complicated and lengthy regulatory processes. We must reach a point where no company should need to wait for more than 6 months for a permit or a license, and new companies should be able to be registered within a day. We will continue to reduce the cost of doing business by reducing port-export tariffs, lowering costs of electricity generation options. Guided by the NDP, it is our responsibility to pursue inclusive, sustainable development that is resilient in the face of climate change. Working in partnership with the private sector, with labor, and the international community, we will step up our adaptation and mitigation efforts. We have the opportunity to be at the forefront of the green growth, of low-carbon industrialization, of pioneering new technologies and taking quantum leaps towards the economy of the future. We must increase the contribution of renewable and clean energy to our national energy mix and explore the potential of the hydrogen economy as well. Faster economic growth also requires accelerated land reform in rural and urban areas and a clear property rights regime. We have received the report of the Presidential Advisory Panel on Land Reform that was being led by the Deputy President, which will now be presented to Cabinet for consideration. The panel's recommendations will inform the finalization of a comprehensive, far-reaching and transformative land reform program. In the immediate term, government will accelerate efforts to identify and release public land that is suitable for smart urban settlements as well as for farming. In the stimulus and recovery package announced last year, we promised to prioritize funding for emerging farmers. Over the medium-term budget period, 3.9 billion rand has been allocated to the Land Bank to support black commercial farmers. An essential part of South Africa's growth strategy is the integration of our economy with those of our neighbors and the rest of our continent. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area will improve the movement of goods and services as well as capital and means of production across the continent. Our revitalized industrial strategy focuses on the expansion of our trade and investment links with Southern Africa, as well as the continent at large. Within the SADC region, we will prioritize development of cross-border value chains in key sectors such as energy, mining, mineral beneficiation, manufacturing, infrastructure, and agro-processing. Now, the growth of our economy will have little value unless it creates employment on a far greater scale. The fact that the unemployment rate among young people is more than 50% is essentially a national crisis. It's a crisis that demands urgent, innovative, coordinated solutions where all of us should see it as a requirement that we should work together. And because more young people are entering the labor force every year, the economy needs to create far more jobs for the youth than it currently does. The brutal reality is that when it comes to youth unemployment, we have to run just to remain in the same place. It is therefore essential that we proceed without delay to implement a comprehensive plan driven and coordinated from the presidency to create no fewer than 2 million new jobs for young people within the next decade. This plan will work across government departments and all 3 tiers of government in partnership with the private sector. We are already working with the private sector to create pathways into work for young people through scaling up existing pathway management networks. These are networks that allow young people who opt in increased visibility, network support, and opportunities to signal their availability for jobs and self-employment. They make sure that young people from poor households, and young women in particular, are empowered to take up the new opportunities. Government will continue to provide employment through the expanded public works program, especially in labor-intensive areas like maintenance, clearing vegetation, plugging water leaks, and constructing roads. We will continue to develop programs to ensure that economically excluded young people are work-ready and are absorbed into sectors where jobs demand is growing. These sectors include global business processing services, agricultural value chains, technical installation, repair and maintenance, and new opportunities provided through the digital economy and the fourth industrial revolution. Government will also ensure that young people are employed in the social economy. We will expand the National Youth Service to take on 50,000 young people a year. Now, government will support tech-enabled platforms for self-employed young people in rural areas and townships. We will expand our programs to enable young people to gain paid workplace experience through initiatives like the Youth Employment Service and also facilitating work-based internships. We're going to roll out small business incubation centers throughout the country to provide youth-driven startups with financial and technical advice as they begin their journeys. Now, yesterday I had the great privilege to meet and engage in dialogue with several young South Africans who are doing simply amazing work to build our country and develop our economy. They are entrepreneurs and community builders and activists and artists. If there is one thing we have learned from our engagements with this country's youth, it is that we cannot impose solutions on them. Everything that has to be done must be led by young people themselves. They have told us very clearly what they want and what they also need. They want to be employed, yes, but they also want to become employers. They are brimming with ideas, and they are at the forefront of innovation, and they want to do things for themselves. We have to support the fire of entrepreneurship that resides in them, because the fortunes of this country depend on the energies and the creative talent of young people. If we are to ensure that within the next decade, every 10-year-old will be able to read for meaning, we will need to mobilize the entire nation behind a massive reading campaign. Early reading is the basic foundation that determines a child's educational progress through school, through higher education, and into the workplace. All foundation and intermediate phase teachers are to be trained to teach reading in English and other African languages, and we are training and deploying a cohort of experienced coaches to provide high-quality on-site support to our teachers. This forms part of the broader effort to strengthen the basic education system by empowering school leadership teams, improving the capabilities of teachers, and ensuring a more consistent measurement of progress for grades 3, 6, and 9. We also have to prepare our young people for the jobs of the future. That is why we are introducing subjects like coding and data analytics at a primary level school. The South Africa we want is a country where all people are safe and feel safe. Let us therefore work together to ensure that violent crime is at least half by the next decade. The first step is to increase police visibility by employing more police women and men, and also to create a more active role for citizens through effective community policing forums. Currently, there are 5,000 students registered for basic training in our police training colleges, and we envisage that this number will increase to 7,000 per cycle over the next 2 intakes. We're working to improve success rates in investigating and prosecuting crimes and to ensure better training and professionalism throughout the criminal justice system. Violent crime, as we all know, is a societal problem that requires a society-wide response. We are working with civil society organizations to end gender-based violence and femicide. Following intensive consultations and engagements, we are working towards the establishment of a gender-based violence and femicide council and a national strategic plan that will guide all of us wherever we are in our efforts to eradicate this national scourge. We are capacitating and equipping the police as well as the court system to support survivors of gender-based violence. We are stepping up the fight against drug syndicates through the implementation of the National Anti-Gang Strategy and the revised National Drug Master Plan. The achievement of all these objectives naturally requires a capable and developmental state. This is a state that not only provides the institutions and infrastructure that enable the economy and society to operate, but that has the means to drive the transformation that we need. Earlier this month, we announced the reconfiguration of a number of government departments to enable them to deliver on their mandates. Our decision was premised on efficiency, cost containment, cooperative governance, and strategic alignment. This is the start of a wider process of arresting the decline in state capacity and restructuring our model of service delivery so that it best serves the citizens of our country. We will be adopting a district-based approach, focusing on the 44 districts and the 8 metros in our country to speed up service delivery, ensuring that municipalities are properly supported and adequately resourced as well. To ensure that the state is able to effectively enable economic and social development, it is essential that we strengthen our state-owned enterprises. Now, through the presidential SOE Council, government intends to create alignment between all state-owned companies and to better define their respective mandates. Through the Council, we will work with the leadership of the SOEs in the form of their boards and their CEOs to develop a legal and regulatory environment that promotes innovation and agility and enhances their competitiveness. We will build on the work we have already begun to address problems of poor governance, inefficiency, and financial sustainability. We are committed to building an ethical state in which there is no place for corruption, patronage, rent-seeking, and the plundering of public money. We want a corps of skilled and professional public servants of the highest moral standards and dedicated to public service. The decisive steps we have taken to end state capture and fight corruption, including measures to strengthen the NPA, the SIU, SARS, and state security, are achieving important results. But there is still much more work that we need to do. We have asked the National Director of Public Prosecutions to develop a plan to significantly increase the capacity and effectiveness of the NPA, including to ensure effective asset seizure or forfeiture. We need to ensure that public money stolen is returned and used to deliver services and much needed basic infrastructure. We expect that the new SIU Special Tribunal will start work within the next few months to fast-track civil claims arising from SIU investigations, which are currently estimated to be around 14.7 billion rand. On our relations with the world, South Africa will continue to play an active role in the quest for global peace and security, people-centered development and prosperity for all. We renew our determination to work in concert with the international community to preserve and protect the rule-based multilateral system with the United Nations at its head. We will use our membership of the UN Security Council to promote the peaceful resolution of disputes, particularly on our own continent. If we are to achieve the South Africa that we want, we need a new social compact. We need to forge durable partnerships between government, business, labor, and civil society. This places a responsibility on each one of us. Government must create an enabling environment. It must use public resources wisely and invest in developing the country's human capital. We would like business to consider the country's national strategic objectives and social considerations in their decisions and in the commercial actions that they embark upon. We agree that labor should advance the interests of workers while at the same time promoting the sustainability of businesses and the creation of jobs. Civil society needs to continue to play its role in holding government to account, but must also join us in practical actions to attain our common goals. We look to parties in this parliament to be a vital part of this partnership, lending support, insights, coming up with practical solutions, and all this being done in the national interest. This social compact requires a contribution from everyone. It will also need sacrifices and trade-offs. It is upon the conduct of each that the fate of all of us depends. If we are to reinvigorate the implementation of the National Development Plan, we must cast our sights on the broadest of horizons. We want a South Africa wherein all enjoy comfort and prosperity. But we also want a South Africa where we will stretch our capacities to the fullest and where we advance along the superhighway of progress. We want a South Africa that has prioritized its rail networks and is producing high-speed trains connecting our megacities and the remotest areas of our country. We should imagine a country where a bullet train passes through Johannesburg as it travels to Messina and it stops in Buffalo City on the way from eThekwini to here in Cape Town. Yes, we want a South Africa with a high-tech economy where advances in e-health, in robotics, and remote medicine are applied as we roll out the national health insurance. What type of South Africa do we want? We want a South Africa that does not simply export its raw materials, but has become a manufacturing hub for key components used in electronics, in automobiles, and in computers. We want a country also that can feed itself, that harnesses the latest advances in smart agriculture. Now, I dream of a South Africa where the first entirely new city built in the democratic era rises with skyscrapers, schools, universities, hospitals, and factories. This dream that I have has been fueled by conversations that I've had with four wonderful people. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Dr. Naledi Pandor, Ms. Jessie Duarte, President Xi Jinping of China, whose account of a China that is now building a new city 100 kilometers from Beijing. Now that has helped to fuel the dream that I have. This is a dream that we can all share and participate in building. Now, what we have not done since the dawn of democracy is we have not built a brand new city in the last 25 years. 75% of South Africans are going to be living in urban areas by 2030. The cities of Johannesburg, Tshwane, Cape Town, and eThekwini are running out of space to accommodate all those who throng to the cities. Has the time not arrived for us to be bold, to reach beyond ourselves and do what we believe is impossible? Has the time not arrived to build a new smart city founded on the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution? Now, I would like to invite South Africans. Yes, where and when. Now, listen carefully. I would like to invite South Africans to begin imagining this prospect. We are the South African nation that with its constitution gives hope to the hopeless, rights to the dispossessed and marginalized. Though we may have faltered, we have not forgotten. We are still that nation. You may ask why I am hopeful. I am hopeful about the many things that we can create, the many things that we can build. I am hopeful because I have walked with the people of this country, the nurses, the health workers, our men and women in uniform, the teachers in our schools, the students who, despite their families' hardships, are determined to succeed, and the youth who are trying to start their own businesses, to invent and create and to rise above their circumstances. If you who give me courage, the people of this country, are able to have dreams, these are dreams and expectations that our people have. What do our people dream of? They dream of a better life for all South Africans. They dream of a life where their children will be able to get an education and a job. They dream, many South Africans dream of starting their own businesses. Now, working together, there is nothing that we cannot achieve. There is nothing that we cannot do. And there is nothing that is impossible to us. Now, all this remains with the doers who are able to get the work done, the doers who are able to have a clear intent on what needs to be done, the people who don't sit by the sidelines and criticize and just scream and shout. Yes, it is these people who fuel, who inspire the people of South Africa. They are the people who look up to those who are able to look forward and see a South Africa that is successful.
Who wants South Africa that we live in to go forward in a very good way?
Those people who are saying this South Africa of us need to move forward, need to develop, so other people can see.
As we enter this new era, an era where we are determined to implement the plans that I have outlined, where we are also prepared to imagine a future which may seem impossible right now, where we are able to imagine things that are impossible. This is the South Africa that we must go for. This is the South Africa that should fuel us, inspire us, and make us move forward. Now, let us take to heart the words of Ben Okri when he says, "Will you be at the harvest among the gatherers of new fruits? Then you must begin today to remake your mental and spiritual world and join the warriors and celebrants of freedom, the realizers of great dreams. You can't remake the world without remaking yourself. It is indeed when you can imagine this South Africa that we are seeking to build that you can remake yourself." He continues to say, "Each new era begins within. It is an inward event with unsuspected possibilities for inner liberation. We could use it to turn on our inward lights. We could use it to use even the dark and negative things positively. We could use the new era to clean our eyes, to see the world differently, to see ourselves more clearly. Only free people can make a free world. Infect the world with your light. Help fulfill the golden prophecies. Press forward the human genius that resides within you. Our future is greater than our past. Close quotes. Fellow South Africans, it is this that in the time of challenge that we've got to start imagining. It is this at a time when our country faces great challenges that we've got to look beyond the horizon and see a South Africa with a growing economy, see a South Africa with our young people employed, and see a South Africa that is winning, a South Africa that is determined to move forward. Now, all I want to end by saying is that this is the South Africa that our people yearn for. This is the South Africa that all South Africans have said they want to see. Let us go on and build this South Africa. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable, the President, for his address. After I adjourned the sitting, members and guests should please remain at their places until the procession has left the chamber. The guests in the gallery should remain seated until the ushers indicate that the doors are open. The procession led by the Sergeant-at-Arms and the usher will leave the chamber in the following order: the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the President, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the Deputy President, the Acting Secretary to Parliament. That, honorable members, concludes the business for the day. The joint sitting is now adjourned.